Two friends went missing while they were on their way to do a land appraisal near German County, Illinois. They disappeared without a trace, and the case went cold for about 48 years, until a car was spotted by fishermen in an Illinois river. In 1976, Everett Hawley was a 72-year-old man and a resident of Stockton, Illinois. Clarence Owens was 65 years old and lived in Freeport, Illinois. These two men were good friends and business partners in the field of real estate. Both were family men. Everett's wife's name was Utha, and the couple had one son. Clarence was divorced and a father of 3 sons. Everett was the former manager of the Federal Land Bank Association in Freeport. He was 6 feet 6 inches and weighed about 250 pounds. Clarence was about 5 feet 8 and 200 pounds. Most people in town still refer to Clarence by his childhood nickname Jum, short for Jumbo. He worked his entire life in real estate and land development. On February 19, 1976, the two men attended a late-morning political rally for gubernatorial candidate James R. Thompson in downtown Pecatonica. They had pie and coffee at a nearby cafe, stopped at a farm auction west of Byron in Ogle County, and were planning to do a land appraisal near German Valley in Stevenson County, but never showed up. They were spotted at the old Leo Borgman farm on Pecatonica Road between 2:30 and 3 p.m. Witnesses reported seeing the men there walking the grounds. Just before that, they stopped by Clarence's son's home in Pecatonica. His son Jim was not home. The men spoke briefly with Jim's wife, Donna. Clarence was driving that day in his gold 1966 Chevrolet Impala. For nearly 50 years, the car was never spotted. It was not resold or relicensed. The families of Clarence and Everett reported them missing the next morning on February 20th. Because both men were well known in the Pecatonica area and had no known enemies, the authorities initially believed they would return before long. When they failed to do so, a large search involving several police and fire agencies was conducted but turned up nothing. The only notable clue over the years has been the fact that there has been no activity in either men's bank account after they were last seen. There was at least one sighting of a gold sedan, and a pair of horn-rimmed glasses, similar to those worn by Clarence, were found alongside an area road. The car sighting did not check out. The lenses on the glasses found on the roadside did not match Clarence's prescription. 48 years later, on March 11, 2024, around 2:30 p.m., crews used a crane to pull a 1966 Chevrolet Impala sedan from the Pecatonica River near the corner of East 1st and Washington Streets in Pecatonica. Fishermen spotted the vehicle at the bottom of the river using a sonar fish finder a few days earlier. The police quickly confirmed that it was the Impala owned by Clarence Owens by verifying its gold paint at a local body shop. When the car was pulled out of the river, authorities recovered more than 100 human bones belonging to 2 individuals. The bones included at least 1 femur and a temporal bone. The Winnebago County Sheriff's Office and the Winnebago County Coroner's officers were in the process of identifying the remains and launched a search for more bones. DNA extracted from the bones was compared with DNA profiles from the men's relatives to identify them. Before the DNA testing, the remains were examined by a forensic anthropologist in St. Louis, Missouri, who found no evidence of trauma. The investigators reported that various personal items were recovered from the Impala, items they hoped will help them identify the skeletal remains. In September 2024, DNA testing performed by the Illinois State Police Division of Forensic Services confirmed that the remains belonged to Clarence Owens and Everett Hawley that went missing in 1976. Winnebago County Sheriff Gary Caruana said in a statement, "This brings us one step closer to providing closure to the families of Clarence Owens and Everett Hawley, who have waited many years for answers that have been affected by this tragic case." Winnebago County Coroner Jennifer Muraski said that how the 2 men lost their lives is still unknown, but no foul play is suspected. Sheriff Caruana said, This is a testament to the dedication and perseverance of our detectives and forensic experts. It is a reminder that no case is ever truly closed, no matter how much time has passed. In September 1997, officers responded to a burglary and brutal attack at a home in Kingsport, Tennessee. Upon arrival, the officers found James Hutson with multiple stab wounds, and he was pronounced deceased on the scene. They also found James's mom, Mary, who had been assaulted. DNA evidence was then collected. However, no match was found. Despite the investigators' efforts, the case remained unsolved and went cold until 27 years later, when the case finally had a breakthrough. Police officers responded to a call on September 6, 1997, at around 4:31 a.m. at a home in the 400 block of Rock Springs Road in Kingsport. The call came from the home across the street, as at the home where the crime took place, the burglar alarm had been disabled and the phone lines cut. At the scene, the Sullivan County Sheriff found 17-year-old James Hutson lifeless. He had been stabbed 24 times. They also found his mother, Mary Hutson. She had been assaulted by an unknown male in her bedroom. Mom and son was the only family members home that night. The other family members were all on a trip with friends. Mary was jarred awake when someone pulled a pillowcase over her head. The next moment, she heard a man's voice and felt him tugging at her shorts before he assaulted her. He then demanded money. She said there was none in the house and offered to give him jewelry instead. He shouted threats as she fumbled, with the pillowcase still over her head, for a ring. She could not find anything. The threats of harm continued as he led her downstairs to the front door, where he made her lay down. He told her she had better not move because he might be right outside the door. She asked him where her son James was, and he advised that he was tied up. The man slipped out of the house, and Mary ran through the house looking for James. She found him in the family room on the floor with several stab wounds and very bloody. Mary said that she never saw the man, but he had a southern accent. James was a student at Sullivan South High School. He enjoyed shooting pool, playing guitar, and listening to Jimi Hendrix's frenzied power chords and Bob Dylan's sagacious lyrics. He was a typical teen trying to find his way in the world. The notion of a career after graduation was still an abstract thought, but he had considered life in the military. The detectives processed the scene and collected all the evidence they could find. They submitted the evidence to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, crime lab for testing. A DNA profile for the suspect was developed and entered into CODIS in hopes that the man would be identified. However, there were no matches to a known individual, and despite extensive investigation efforts over the years, the case remained unsolved. Mary Hutson passed away a year after the 1997 crime due to lung cancer, despite being an avid runner who never smoked. In 2023, Sullivan County Sheriff's Office detectives reopened the case and began reviewing the evidence. Working with TBI agents as part of the TBI Cold Case Initiative, a decision was made to team with Othram in hopes that advanced DNA testing could help to identify the suspect in the case and to bring an end to a decades-long mystery. A potential suspect was identified as George Robinson, who was born on March 22, 1964. He was located in Kingsport, and the investigators obtained a DNA sample from him. The sample and additional evidence was sent to the TBI crime lab for further analysis. TBI forensic scientists directly compared Robinson's DNA with the DNA profile developed from evidence collected in 1997 and concluded it was a confirmed match. On November 20th, 2024, a Sullivan County grand jury returned indictments charging George Robinson with slaying. When the deputies attempted to take Robinson into custody, he barricaded himself inside of his apartment. The Sullivan County SWAT team responded to Robinson's apartment, which is located along Hillview Drive in Kingsport, and attempted to negotiate with Robinson. Robinson refused to cooperate. After several hours, the SWAT team made entry into the apartment, at which point Robinson shot himself. He was transported to a local hospital for treatment. Robinson remains hospitalized. Family members of Mary and James spoke at a press conference. One of the family members said, "First of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you so much. These are happy tears, but these are also tears of missing my family. It has been really, really hard. 27 years is a long time, but it always feels like yesterday." No court date has yet been set for Robinson. A 78-year-old beloved and caring grandmother from Dallas, Texas, was brutally taken from this world in January 1989. There was significant DNA evidence collected and tested, but no match for decades, until a possible suspect was identified following testing from a private lab that created a DNA family tree. The perpetrator was right under their noses at the time of the slaying. This case was the first genetic genealogy DNA slaying trial in Dallas County. On January 19, 1989, Dallas police responded to reports of a demise at 411 North Francis Street. One of Mary Hague Kelly's relatives grew concerned that she might be sick or injured. When he went to check on her, he found her lifeless. Upon arrival, officials found Mary stuffed underneath her bed, naked from the waist down. She was pronounced deceased at the scene. The police said that there was no sign of forced entry, but Mary's purse, jewelry, antique phone, and 1980 Chevy Monte Carlo were stolen. Mary, a fragile older lady of 78 years old, weighing about 80 pounds, had been assaulted and strangled inside the Oak Cliff home. Her cause of demise was found to be strangulation. DNA samples were taken from Mary's body at the time, and an investigation was launched. The investigators interviewed several persons of interest and canvassed local pawn shops for Mary's stolen valuables, but to no avail. The investigation went cold, even after case information was sent to the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program in hopes of finding similar cases. In 2004, the investigators revisited evidence from the crime scene and recovered a suspect's DNA from Mary's body, but testing at the time yielded no results. In November 2021, the Dallas County District Attorney's Office enlisted the help of Othram, who used forensic-grade genome sequencing to develop a genealogical profile of the suspect. On June 28, 2022, genetic genealogy led to the half-brother of the man whose DNA was found on Mary's body. It turned out that he had lived next door to Mary at the time of her demise. The police tracked down the half-brother in question and then used a six-pack of beer that the suspect discarded to match his DNA to that which was found on Mary's body. On July 22, 2022, 3 decades after Mary's slaying, the Dallas Police Department announced the arrest of 53-year-old David Rojas. Rojas was charged with capital slaying and was held at the Dallas County Jail on $750,000 bond. At the time of Mary's brutal attack, Rojas was 20 years old. On November 7, 2024, Rojas was sentenced to life in prison without parole and was also accused of assaulting 2 of his own family members. After Judge Layla Lawrence Mays sentenced Rojas, victims, and family addressed him with personal statements. One of the 6 male jurors stayed to listen. He wept while hearing details from the 2 female family members Rojas was charged with assaulting when they were about 9 and 12 years old. One of his victims said aloud in her victim's statement that she is glad jurors found him guilty. She said, "What you did to me and my sister, especially my mom, what you did to women and children, you are a sick person. That will be the last time you lay your hands on a woman ever again in your life." A woman's life was brutally taken away and her body dumped in the woods of New Jersey. Her mother held out hope and wished every year that her perpetrator would someday be brought to justice. The investigators did not have much to go on, except for an eyewitness account and DNA found on the victim's body, which was not easily matched to a suspect, and the case went cold. Decades after her body was found, a suspect has been extradited from Canada to face slaying charges for the crime he committed. On the afternoon of November 4th, 1997, at around 4:30 p.m. The body of 23-year-old Tammy Tignor was found near a hiking trail off Gilbride Road in Bridgewater near Washington Valley Park. The 23-year-old had been strangled, and her demise was ruled to be a slaying. Her body was found on the dirt access road that ended in a cul-de-sac by an ATV rider. The Bridgewater police and Somerset County investigators searched the woods for days, looking for any evidence or clues that could lead them to the perpetrator. But for years, the case remained unsolved. The last person who saw Tammy alive saw her get into an orange van at around 4 a.m. on November 4th. The van was also seen in Newark, a city that Tammy frequently visited. DNA evidence found on Tammy's body provided no answers. Her family, meanwhile, suffered the agony of losing their daughter while knowing the person responsible was walking free. Somerset County Assistant Prosecutor Mike McLaughlin said, "Tammy's mom called our office every year on November 4th, the anniversary of Tammy's demise, looking for an update. For years, investigators with the county's major crimes and cold case units, along with town police, continued to look into the mysterious slaying. 25 years later, in January 2023, evidence in the case was allowed to be resubmitted for DNA testing, which the prosecutor's office said may not have been possible in previous years. A few months later, in April, state police got a high stringency match based on resubmitted evidence for a possible suspect in the case. The suspect was identified as 60-year-old Robert Creeder. A first-degree slaying charge against Creeder was authorized in May 2023, but there was an issue. Creeder was born in Canada before he was adopted when he was young and moved to New Jersey. Creeder had since moved back to Winnipeg, Canada in 2002. Canadian court records show that Creeder was convicted of 1 count of assault and 2 counts of assault causing bodily harm in 2002. He was also convicted of disobeying a court order in 2010, along with 2 probation breaches. Creeder was transient and did not have a permanent address in Winnipeg. Investigators have also linked Creeder, who was working as a day laborer in Bridgewater, New Jersey when Tammy's body was found, to an orange van. After the Somerset County Prosecutor's Office worked with the U.S. Department of State, Creeder was taken into custody on June 27, 2024, by Canadian authorities based on the warrant for his arrest in New Jersey. On December 3rd, Creeder was extradited back to New Jersey and taken into custody in connection to the slaying nearly 3 decades ago. The investigators have not divulged a motive for Tammy's slaying, but that her demise was a purposeful slaying. Tammy and Creeder did not know each other. Somerset County Assistant Prosecutor Michael McLaughlin said, "It has been 27 years, 9,885 days since her body was found. I spoke with the victim's mother. I told her that we had arrested the man who took her daughter's life. It was incredibly emotional. She was very thankful to our detectives today and our detectives at the time." The prosecutors said that it was not a genealogical DNA finding made through a family member, but rather was a case where New Jersey State Police used new DNA testing to run the sample again and compare it to CODIS, which led to a match for Creeder. Young Tracy Whitney was at a Burger King with her friends and an ex-boyfriend. After getting into an argument, she decided to walk away. Little did she know this walk would lead to her end. Her brutal slaying in northwestern Washington left detectives lost for answers for decades. With no success and no leads, the case went cold until DNA evidence finally helped crack this cold case. On August 27, 1988, 18-year-old Tracy Whitney was at Burger King with some friends and an ex-boyfriend. While there, she had gotten into an argument and walked away from the Burger King in Federal Way. 13 hours later, Tracy's body was found by fishermen on a sandbar where the Stuck River and the Puyallup River meet, near the city of Sumner. The crime scene where her body was found was described as horrific. She was found nude. Her autopsy confirmed her cause of demise was asphyxia from strangulation and probable smothering. She was believed to have been beaten and assaulted, which additional autopsy findings supported. At the time of Tracy's demise, Pierce County detectives tried to develop leads as they searched for whomever was responsible in her end. They interviewed people who knew her and people who she had been romantically involved with. They also administered polygraph tests. Despite collecting DNA samples from her body that presumably belonged to the perpetrator, the investigators were unable to pinpoint a suspect. The case went cold and remained unsolved for years. In 2005, another effort to find the suspect by running those DNA samples through CODIS ultimately proved unsuccessful as no matches were found. It was not until 2022, owing to a grant from the Washington State Attorney General's office, that a Pierce County Sheriff's cold case detective submitted the DNA to a genetic genealogy laboratory for repeat testing. Law enforcement found a match to Tracy's perpetrator by way of a family member. Findings from the genealogy lab led detectives to the biological son of their suspect, who was identified as John Guillot Jr. of Puyallup. In December 2024, it was confirmed that Guillot was in fact a match for the DNA found on Tracy's body. Guillot passed away from cancer in January 2022. He had a strange history. His wife had taken her own life with a firearm. That case was investigated, and no foul play was suspected. In 2021, he had another demise in the family. His girlfriend, who was living with him, needed to be cared for. He was her caretaker. His son also lived in the house. They were negligent in taking care of her. The Pierce County Sheriff's Office said in a statement that there were no connections between Tracy and Guillot, and detectives believe this was a stranger abduction, assault, and slaying. Tracy's case had finally been solved. The Sheriff's Office said, "Our cold case unit is always looking into the past, trying to find answers for families just like Tracy's. We are glad they can finally have an answer and some closure with the solving of this case." Although Tracy's perpetrator could not be prosecuted, her relatives said that knowing he has been identified does bring them some sense of peace. Her sister, Robin Whitney, who was 11 years old at the time of Tracy's demise, said that she hopes identifying Guillot publicly helps solve other cold cases, as she believes he may have committed multiple crimes during his life. A repair shop worker and beloved family member and friend was violently assaulted in an Essex Street attack in February 2014 that left him a paraplegic. A decade after his attack, he passed away, and the investigators linked the 2014 attack to his demise. After a few years, the person responsible was finally arrested. On February 11, 2014, 36-year-old Stuart Coldicott sustained a massive head injury in Colchester, England, leaving him paralyzed and in need of complex daily care. After his accident, he was admitted to the hospital. Stuart's head injury was initially treated by medics as life-threatening. Their expertise helped Stuart's condition to improve, and he was subsequently discharged from the hospital. The police investigation started right after Stuart was attacked, focused on Barrack Street and Harsnet Road in Colchester. CCTV footage was examined, and a mobile police station was set up. At the time, the force ruled Stuart's injuries to have been the result of a serious assault, but they were unable to prove it. 10 years later, in March 2024, Stuart sadly lost his life. Stuart was known for always putting a smile on everyone's faces. He was described as a dearly loved brother, brother-in-law, uncle, great-uncle, son, and friend. His loved ones said that although he suffered this tragic fate, he never lost his naughty sense of humor. A forensic post-mortem examination identified a causal link between his head injury from February 11, 2014, and his demise. As a result, a fresh investigation was launched. During this investigation, a number of new lines of inquiry and fresh evidence have been uncovered. Essex police launched a slaying investigation after Stuart's demise. Detective Inspector Lydia George of the Kent and Essex Serious Crime Directorate said, "The injuries Stuart sustained had a significant and long-lasting impact on him and, of course, his family. When Stuart passed away and a causal link to the head injury was established, We began treating his demise as a slaying, and our fresh investigation was launched. On November 11th, 2024, the force confirmed that a 61-year-old man was arrested in the city on suspicion of slaying following Stuart's demise. He has since been released on police bail until December. Stuart's family said, "Nobody could replace him, and he will always remain in our hearts." All the family members and friends will greatly miss Stevie very much, and our mischievous family member is gone from this world, but not from our hearts.